Welcome to the Generation Hustle podcast, a show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Sheriston, alongside my good friend Amin, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Jeff Lopes. Jeff is the founder and president of Kimurawear, a leader in quality and innovative products in the martial arts community. Founded in 2006 in Brampton, Ontario, which just so happens to be the same city we're in, Kimurawear began creating training equipment for professional athletes of various disciplines. With their unique approach of forward thinking and attention to detail, the brand took over the MMA scene, being featured on UFC stars such as Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Chan Sung Young, Dales Leadus, and Jose Aldo. Jeff has since diversified his business portfolio, expanding into the world of real estate with various cottage properties across Ontario, as well as his own podcast called Jeff Knows Inc. We speak to Jeff about his journey into the combat sports world and what strategies he used to market his products to star athletes, especially before the days of social media. Jeff also explains how he pivoted from athletic wear to real estate to his own podcast. He also touches on the importance of balance and family in his life. This was a truly inspirational conversation with a true go-getter in all sense of the word. If you're looking for some energy to fire you up today, click play and listen to Jeff's story.
We also want to give a special shout out to today's sponsor, Podcorn. So let me ask you this. You're a growing brand looking to partner with other companies to help scale your business? Or you're like us, a podcast looking at brands to partner with? Like many business founders, you find it extremely difficult to find these opportunities. Well, that was their case originally for the Generation Hustle podcast before we started using Podcorn. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting podcasters to amazing sponsorship opportunities, such as host-read ads, interview segments, topical discussions, and more. With Podcorn, there is no middleman. Podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on the platform, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly with no exclusivities. This opens up the opportunity for you as a business or a podcast to scale much faster. So what are you waiting for? Check out podcorn.com to start growing.
Let's get started here with kind of your story on Kimura, because that's where we kind of recognized you from. And growing up, we've always been big MMA fans and fight fans. And so when we got the gear, it was kind of like, yeah, this is legitimate, right? Like this is the brand. So can you talk to us about your journey with Kimura, like how that kind of got started? What kind of attracted you to that gear of combat sports world?
The brand started, actually started summer of 2005 when I started to kind of focus on and start figuring out the brand and figuring out logistics and figuring out materials and figuring out a lot of stuff like that. I launched a brand January 2006. It was more of a situation where I've been in martial arts my whole life, on and off, training. At that time, I was training pretty heavily, and I just saw that it was just before the whole UFC like kind of rose.
Yeah,
and I saw, you know what, there's really nothing out there right now, and it all started with an apparel company, where back then that whole UFC apparel thing it took off, right? So I started off with an apparel company. We started off. I'm Portuguese. I speak Portuguese. I started hooking up with all these Brazilian fighters, and I started doing walkout shirts for them all. And then from there, I went to Frankie Eggers. I went to, like, at one point we had 27 guys in the UFC with our walkout shirts. And that was before Tapo, before all these other massive brands came in.
Yeah.
And if you actually go back to remember those little UFC figurines you sell at Walmart? I still have a bunch in the office. They all had Kimurawear t-shirts when they first started, right? So we had walkout shirts for all the guys, like Matt Hamels, all those guys. And then all of a sudden the Tapos came in, and all these big money and big companies that were just throwing tons of cash into guys. And I had to reposition the company. I was like, either I'm going to go bankrupt trying to fight these guys, or I'm going to reposition. And that's when I kind of transitioned really quickly. And that's one thing I've always done with all my companies. I never fall in love with something. I look at something, and the minute I see where the market is going, I try to veer and go a different way. I've always done it with all my companies. Yeah. So all of a sudden it's like, you know what, let's start playing around with equipment. And that's how the longevity of the equipment and the brand is gone. And from there, we've focused on custom. We're always repositioning ourselves, right? So we started with the equipment, and it just took off. And I found that a lot of the higher end brands, they weren't focusing directly to the gyms. They were focusing directly to the online consumer. And that was my niche. And I said, you know, we're going direct to gyms, we're going wholesale. we develop, we brand, we manufacture our own stuff, and we went directly to the gyms and we built a market in North America. We deal with about 1,800 gyms right now. I mean, obviously the pandemic has changed a lot of that, like for most companies, but it put us in a good position. And 15 years later, we're still strong in the industry, right? And when I started, there was 6 big competitors in Ontario, and as of like 2 years ago, they were pretty much all gone. Wow. And there's always brands popping up. That's just every industry, right? And and one thing I do with business is I never focus. I know a lot of people focus on competition. I never focus on competition. I don't care what they're doing. I don't care what they're coming out, who they're sponsoring. I stay in my lane. I focus on what I know. And I just keep growing and growing the brand, and I work with the customer and I see what they want, what they're looking for, and we test, and we always rotating, and it's very seasonal with the colors and all that stuff, and we just keep growing the brand.
For sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And one of the things that you mentioned there was kind of just like the importance of focusing on the brand and kind of what that consumer will come to. Or is looking for. So I want to go back to the beginning of Kimurawear. You said there was a point where like there were 17 UFC fighters kind of sporting the brand.
Yeah, was that 27 at one point? Yeah.
27. So was that like one of the moments where you were kind of like, this is taking off now. Like this is my.
Oh, the UFC was taking off. Sorry, the UFC was taking off. I was still running a couple other companies at that point. I've always been building and selling brands and stuff, and the UFC was taking off at that point. And I saw that there was a peak, and I was okay, you know what, I gotta jump on that roller coaster, right? Because there's money to be made here. Because there was one point where it's like everywhere you turn, there's a UFC fighter doing a sign. It was just it was insane for a few years, right? So I saw that peak, and as it was growing, I realized like, there's a business to be here, right? And then when you start actually going into the equipment, you say, you know what, like look at. If you pick one niche, which is Muay Thai, for example, there at one point there's like 60 gyms in Ontario alone just for Muay Thai. You talk about boxing, there's another 100 and something. Ontario alone, we had over 500 gyms that we're dealing with. So it's insane for such a small market, and it is very small niche. Don't get me wrong, it's very mama papa, right? Because most of these martial art gyms are very mama papa gyms, but there's so many of them. Yeah. So if you service them right, you build proper systems, it's a doable, comfortable business that you're growing, right? And we were growing at a rate between 20 to 25% steadily per year. We were growing at a crazy rate. And besides the pandemic, this January and February, we were on record months again, like record months. And then March 18th, shit hit the fan, and all the gyms closed. But we were on such a crazy pace again. So it's been a situation where year by year, month by month, I'm a type of person where I go month by month situations when it goes to business, and I'll look at our past year's month to month situation, and we set goals for that month on the prior year. Right. And we focus on, okay, this is how many net sales we have to get. This is our number. This is how many customers we got. This is how many customers we got to retain, and we flow with it. Right. And we've been lucky. I mean, there's always an aspect of luck when it comes to business. Right. But it also smart. And by building the proper, I guess, connections, the proper relationships, it's helped us grow at a really, really decent, comfortable rate, right?
For sure. Yeah. And can you break that down a little bit, like in terms of the relationship that you mentioned? Because to hit 500, say, gyms in Ontario, and to hit like 25% growth every year, like what were some of the strategies you were doing to kind of achieve that?
We were working, it's constantly looking at what the customer's needs are. So we started off with, for example, we were originally a full high-end brand. So I said, you know what, I want to have quality. And it was all leather stuff when we first started. And then I was like, you know what's happening now? We're going directly to gyms. People are walking to a gym for the first time. They're not going to spend $100 on a pair of gloves. They're going to walk to your local Walmart and buy another brand I want to name for $30. And I was like, how do we compete with that? And that's when the Spire line came out, and we started designing other brands. So we had to obviously convert into different lines, different materials, bringing our costs down, bringing obviously the volume up, and start working at that. And then from there, we started getting contracts with a lot of franchises. And the franchise market is massive with the whole cardio kick and the cardio kickboxing and all the, I don't want to name names, but all these companies are opening up all these franchises. And that was I saw the niche in that, all this cardio kick and fitness, because reality is martial arts is fantastic.
Right.
But the fitness industry is always going to be a massive, way, way bigger industry. So I started focusing on the mixture of the fitness with the kickboxing. So something I knew, started focusing on the fitness and getting contracts with all these franchises. And right now we have contracts with like 12 different franchises and we're exclusive rights to them, right? And we do licensing agreements. So there's no branding on it for Kimurawear, but we have exclusive rights to them. So that's a nasty part of it, right? So one of these alone, we're doing 3,000 pairs of gloves a month without even trying, right?
Wow.
So that's a huge part of what we do, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So what goes into like that kind of partnership, like the nuances in terms of making an exclusive deal and kind of that?
You know what? At the end of the day, it's all relationships.
Okay.
It's just building the relationships. We're humans and people still like dealing with humans. People like having that connection, that one-on-one talk. Like I'm the type where I still talk to most of my customers. I mean, and I know there's two mindsets with doing that, because a lot of entrepreneurs will be like, oh, at this level, you shouldn't be working the business. But I still enjoy talking to people. I still enjoy listening to people. They'll call me up. I give my cell phone to everybody and people are calling me up. And a lot of and it just works in a way where a lot of my customers from Kimurawear will call. Now they over the years, they've learned that my business background, and they're now calling me on a regular basis. Like I have 2 calls this afternoon for gym owners that wanted me to help them with other ventures.
Right.
And I'll take them on and I'll help them with other ventures and stuff like that. Right. So you build that trust in that relationship, right? And one of the original OGs of martial arts in Ontario, Paul Menace, he's I mean, Joseph Alatanini, he was his coach and all that stuff. We're on the phone for like an hour yesterday talking other business, and he's calling me for advice of other business. So it's building those long-term relationships, right? And just being honest with people, right? That's the only thing. And you're not going to make everybody happy. You're not going to get everybody's business, and you have to understand that. And you have to, when I first started this company, and like most companies, is you build that connection with people, and then all of a sudden that person strives and buys something else or goes to another brand, and it's like, oh, that hurt. Like, what the hell are you doing? There's no loyalty. And you have to understand that in business, there's zero loyalty in business. You just have to understand that you're trying to offer them the best service you can. And at the end of the day, you're hoping they're going to come back and they're going to stay with you. Right. But there's guys that are going to come and go. That's like every industry, right? So just building those relationships, strong relationships, and like I said, for the franchises, they all started off with just one-on-one relationships, and then from there, that person would start talking to the other franchises. Then it start building, and then before you know it, you have a contract with them. Yeah. So a lot of all my stuff I've ever done has been essentially just building relationships with people, right?
Yeah. Speaking about relationships, so that brings us to a perfect segue. You've obviously sponsored with 27 UFC athletes. So let's talk about the UFC specifically this time around.
Yeah.
One of the issues that's grappling them right now is obviously the whole idea of a union versus, how the UFC currently pays. What are your thoughts on that? And the other area is with Reebok's exclusivity in terms of
that's changed, right? Venum.
They just ended.
Okay,
so Venum's got the new contract.
Okay. So, Venum. Let's talk about Venum. They probably have exclusive rights now. And first, let's talk about the fighter pay and kind of the unionized field, if you can, and then let's go into the exclusivity in terms of discussing how that impacts maybe a fighter's brand and their opportunity to monetize their own kind of brand.
It's changed. I mean, the whole UFC landscape has changed drastically over the last 2-3 years. There was a point when UFC fighters were coming into the UFC, getting a 2-3 fight contract. And if they didn't have sponsors, they were losing money.
Yeah.
By the time they paid for their training camp, they were getting $2,500 a fight, $2,500 a win. So you're doing a 3-month contract. You're 3-month training camp, paying trainers, nutrition, supplements, on and on and on, travel costs. You would go to the UFC, they would pay for one side corner man, and you'd bring 2 or 3 of your buddies with you. So these guys were getting to UFC where it's like they're on TV and they're an athlete, they're a pro athlete, and they're trying to live this lifestyle as a pro athlete. And reality is, who lives off $5,000 in 3 months with a crazy amount of bills? You can't. You can't survive on that. And so there was a point when athletes were making more off sponsors than they were off their fights. And I mean a lot more. Their top, like I was helping Fabricio Verdum, Talis, I was helping these guys get sponsors at one point. Like I got Verdum for his fight for against oh my God, what's that guy's name? The legend from Strike Force and everything. He's, oh my God, Bellator now.
Fedor?
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
God, sorry, I drew a blank there. When he fought Fedor, he made almost double in sponsor. He made I got him like almost over 40 G's in sponsorship that fight. So they were making a lot more in sponsorship than they were in the actual fights. Over the last few years, the UFC is paying a little bit better. They're giving them some more benefits, some more health benefits, stuff like that. So it has changed. And I understand the UFC's position because they're trying to position themselves to be one of the pro kind of sports compared to the NFL or NFL or Major League Baseball. They're trying to get in that realm. Right. So by doing that, they obviously have to pay a little bit better. They have to set certain standards. But reality is UFC fighters are still not making a ton of money.
Yeah.
They're not making a lot of money. And the sad part is your career might be 1, 2, 3 years max. And a lot of these guys is once they're done their career, they have nowhere to go with it.
Right.
They're working at a local gym trying to train people. And you're looking at that it's just a complete shit show still. So you're getting your top 3, 4, 5 guys that are making the money, and then everybody else on the card they're just flowing through, right? In and out. They'll fight 3, 4 fights. They'll be out of the UFC. So it in that aspect, I do think a union would be fantastic.
Right.
I think it will help a lot of the athletes because they're essentially in a career that they're one punch away from ending their career, right?
Anything, yeah.
Yeah. So I think a union would be fantastic with that. When it comes to the sponsorship aspect, the UFC they put a stranglehold on all the athletes by taking that advantage of doing, like I said, I understand because they want to look professional. They want to have a standard. They want to have a look. They want to have a uniform, just like every other league. But by doing that, they're essentially cutting a huge chunk of their income, huge chunk of their income. Where you're hearing some UFC fighters now saying they're making more off posts on Instagram than they are off their UFC fights.
Yeah.
Which is insane when you think about it. These are pro athletes. These are guys that are training at the highest level of their sport, and a sport that's making millions and millions of dollars, and they could barely live a normal life, live like an average life, right? So that's the sad part of it all. And with the whole deal with like I said, with Reebok and all that, their actual cut of it is so tiny, so tiny. They're making nothing off that. The UFC is making all of it. So it's just sad to see, right? And you'd think it would change, and maybe the union would change it. Do I think it will ever happen? No, I don't think the UFC will let it happen, because they'll put a stranglehold on the athletes. When the athletes start pushing towards it, those athletes are gone, and then the new ones coming up are like, oh, I want to make the UFC. I don't want to piss them off. And it's just it's a whole almost little spiral effect, right? So will they kick in? No, I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah. No, it's that domino effect you just described. It's just like if one guy goes out, another one's waiting in the door.
That's all it is. Yeah. That's all it is. If you stop watching UFC for 2 months, you won't even recognize half the names on the roster.
Yep.
That's how it is, right?
They've achieved that point now where it's like there's more demand for the fighters than they have the leverage to pull on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So what was it like for Kimurawear, knowing that, hey, like a new brand is coming in and they're the exclusive kind of brand and their go-to? So what was that kind of impact to you, and how did you kind of pivot around that?
I realized really quickly that sponsoring athletes at that level, at the beginning, helped for brand positioning. But once you establish a brand, it means absolutely nothing. I mean, you're going to get I would say factor in 5% of my sales would factor in if I had a big UFC fighter wearing my stuff. The other 95% of those sales, it's all about quality and price point.
Right.
And in the end of the day, 95% of people that join a gym that are going to train, if that gym owner, which is the person I'm trying to keep happy, says, hey, these are good gloves, those are the gloves they're going to buy. So I started positioning myself and saying, hey, if I'm using all this money towards fighters, now I'm saving all this money instead of sponsoring fighters. And now I could give certain stuff to certain owners of gyms and build better relationships and focus on building the brand towards gyms more. It'll position me a lot better. And I said, Venum, all these other brands, Hayabusa, go do your stuff. I'm going to stick to my wholesale. I'm going to stick to my things. And it's worked fantastic for us. Right.
Yeah. Sticking true to, I think what works is always a smart plan, the smartest business plan that you could do. Like you mentioned earlier in this podcast, like you don't really focus on what your competition's doing.
No.
And I think that's like a smart move on your end because you know what works for you and it's been working for the long term.
If I were to focus on the other brands, and like I said, like there's a few big name brands, if I were to focus on what they're doing, the amount of marketing, the amount of advertising, I wouldn't compete with that.
Yeah.
And my mindset is all about profit margins, right? So it's all about, I'm manufacturing the goods. I'm selling them at a lower cost than most other brands at a good quality, lower cost. So my thing is just getting it out, volume, getting it out to the consumer. And that's like, as of last year we had hit over 20, I think it's 250,000 pairs of gloves we've sold already.
Yeah. Wow.
And this year, I mean, obviously everything, I haven't been looking at our numbers, but by January, we should be hitting close to 300,000 pairs of gloves,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. When I started this, I never thought that would ever happen. Right.
Yeah.
So it's been a fun journey and I'm still enjoying it. Right. So and this is the only company, guys, besides my real estate, we'll talk about, this is the only company I've ever held on to.
Yeah.
All the other companies, it's been 2 years, 3 years. I get bored of the hell of it and I move on with it. This is the only company I've kind of longevity held on to it and enjoyed it. Right.
Right. Is it maybe because of the passion about the sport, or is it one, obviously is successful, but does that have a factor in this?
I mean, there's tons of factors. I mean, do I have the passion for the sport the way I did before? Probably not, but I still enjoy it a lot. I still see there's a need for it. I still see that the market is still growing. And I do realize that the market's not going to go away. There's always going to be people who want to be fit. There's always people going to want to do martial arts. So my niche is no matter what, is always going to be there, right? This need for what I'm providing is always going to be there. So there's always going to be a market. Now you look at the market and be like, I could have probably doubled or tripled where we are positioning over the last 4 or 5 years, but I felt a comfort level with where the brand was and where it is, and I like our steady growth. I don't want. There's been moments where I could have signed contracts with big retailers and took on off, but the fall is a lot harder as well. So that's how I've done all my brands and all my companies, just slow, steady growth. Watch everybody drop off and just keep going. Almost that turtle mentality, right? And years pass by, like time flies. Yeah. I'm thinking 15 years, most companies don't last 5 years, never mind 15 years, right? So having that longevity and building the brand value, I think is massive, right? And now we got to the point where we've built the brand value. And be honest, I think the brand itself is probably worth more than actually what we sell. So I look at the brand value and what I built, and it's kind of more of like a legacy right now. Just let it go. Will my kids take it on? Probably not. Let's be realistic. But it's just more of a legacy and just flowing. But at the same time too, I'm aware, and we talked about this at the beginning, is I still have that relationship with my customers. I still come to the office every day. And I also realize that it's a brand, and brands could position themselves out and in very rapidly. And that's why I focus on a lot. There's been a couple situations in my life that things have happened we'll talk about, but that's why I've positioned myself with the real estate and other ventures, because you have to have that passive income no matter what to keep growing, right? And I've used Kimurawear as a totem pole. I've used Kimurawear as a ladder to getting to these other stuff. Kimurawear has been so successful that I've used it to build other things, right?
Yeah, so we talk about diversification on a lot of our episodes, right? So you can't just have I guess everything in one basket. So you just mentioned you ventured into real estate and your company is called True Blue Homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so talk to us about that. So obviously you've been kind of entrepreneurial since the beginning of time, I
Yeah.
assume. And so what was it like, and what's the importance for you and kind of diversifying, and what's your aspect on real estate and other investments?
There's a little story, if you guys are cool with me going.
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
So, and people that know me know my story. And 12 years ago, my son was born. And you guys from Ontario, so you know Sick Kids Hospital. It was an emergency session. He was rushed to Sick Kids. We almost lost him 3-4 times. He spent the first 4 months of his life at Sick Kids. And he was diagnosed with, and before this, I'll just bring it back 2 secs. I was working insanely crazy hours with Kimurawear, insane hours. And I had a daughter, but my daughter was 2 years old, year and a half old, but I was working insane hours. It was all work, 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 work. And when he was born, life changed. I shut Kimurawear down for almost 4 months. A lot of people weren't aware of that. And for 4 months, all my focus was getting him out of the hospital. And that became my purpose. And there was one moment when we were taking him out of the hospital, we kind of forced the doctors to allow him to come home. He was only 4.5 pounds. They wanted him to be 5 pounds before he came home. And I was like, we've been here for 4 months. I could take care of my kid at this point. And I forced the doctors to put my wife in a room for 3 days. And I said, I don't want no dots around. I just want to prove that we could take care of this kid before we take him home. So you were there for 3 days. We were about to release him, and they gave me some papers, and they said, here's his diagnosis. We got to diagnose him before he leaves. And they wanted to diagnose him with CP, which is cerebral palsy. And they said he would probably be in a wheelchair. He probably wouldn't walk. And that just instantly just hit me at that moment where I didn't want somebody else to define my kid's future. And I knew once you had defined with CP, driver's license, just his future would be changed. And I literally took those papers. In that moment, I threw them back to the doctor and said, you're not going to define my kid. And I grabbed my kid and I left. And that became my purpose. And my mindset is I'm going to get him to walk. I'm going to get him to run. I'm going to get him to do all that stuff. So at that point, I knew I had to focus on spending time at home. And that's when the whole venture, and we'll get into that with real estate and all that stuff and passive income started. So over the next 12 years, he became my purpose. And if you ever see our Instagram stories, this kid is 12 years old and he's a little baseball star. He's a fitness star and he's getting ready to run his first marathon. Wow. So we got him away from wheelchair. He had AFO's braces. As of this September, he's supposed to be wearing braces. He was 18. As of this September, we got him out of braces. And right now he's running pretty much a 5K in like 40 minutes. Wow. And he's 12 years old. And this kid's a fitness star. He loves fitness. He loves working out. He works out 5-6 days a week on his own at 12 years old, which is insane. So he's become my purpose. And because of that, it repositioned me where we talked before we went on air, like focusing on, I'm going to be home from 3 to 7 o'clock every day. I want to make sure I spend every dinner with my kids. I want to be able to understand their lives. I want to be able to be with them. I want to be at every sporting event with them. I want to be at every recital with my daughter. And that became my purpose. And from there, I realized in order to do that, I had to position myself with other stuff because Kimurawear, it was taking too much of my time. Right. So I positioned the right staff here and I started to focus on, and I thought of real estate had to be the only way to do it. You always hear horror stories with commercial, with just normal real estate, which is actually getting people to residential real estate. There's horror stories. So I started looking into vacation rentals, mm-hmm. and that's how it all started up in Blue Mountain. And I quickly grew the portfolio of four properties up in Blue Mountain, right at the bottom of the hill, and that's 4 seasons. It's taken off, and it's we run at about 95% occupancy there, and then and from there. I did a couple other little business ventures, and just recently I'm in the process of building a 16-acre little cabin resort in Muskoka, which will be ready by spring, summer this 2021, right? So there's a lot of just ventures I've done, but that passive income has allowed me to really take a step back and just, you know what, instead of making Kimurawear keep growing, I'm comfortable with Kimurawear slowly continuing and doing his own thing. And then at the same time now, this passive income's allowed me to just keep growing and building as a company, right?
Yeah. And what was the learning process? Obviously, going from a traditional business to real estate, there must be.
I can honestly tell you, buddy, I've never had that learning process in a way where I've never had mentors. I'm actually talking to somebody right now the other day, and David Miltzer, and this guy's just huge in the motivational speaking and in the business world. And we were talking about, he's had mentors. He has Bob Proctor as his mentor, all these people as his mentors. And I'm like, I've never had a mentor. I mean, I've had my grandfather. My grandfather was a very successful entrepreneur back in Portugal, and he's not with us no longer, but I had to talk to him about business. But I'm the type of person, I jump in and I figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm this type of person where I always have that mindset where if you're willing to do something, like I'm the type of person where it's like, I'll grab a hammer and nail and I'll go build it, where I'm building cabins by myself. I've never done construction in my life.
Yeah.
There's tons. There's a way. If somebody else could do it and somebody else does it for a living, there's ways of learning how to do it. And it's people that are too scared to take that step, right? So I've always had that mindset where it's like, just jump into it and it'll figure its way out. And if I have questions along the way, I'll find the right people to ask the questions to. Yeah. Right. So I think that's the biggest lesson too, is I always tell people is everybody has these ideas and nobody takes action towards them. So it was a situation where I had an idea and I just took action towards it. And all my real estate deals have been private deals. I've written up all my contracts. Wow. I just bring it to a lawyer. The lawyer finalizes it and I go on. I've never dealt with real estate agents. And I just like my 4 properties up in Blue Mountain, the first one we found through a connection, but the other 3 were just knocking on doors, and people have been there for years and years and they were ready to retire and they wanted to get rid of their vacation homes up and things, and I ended up purchasing them. Right. So that's been the same thing. And same with the real estate up in Muskoka, exact same thing. It was just, there wasn't no real estate agents involved. And I've always been able to be at the right spot at the right time, but at the same time too, just it's just sitting back and waiting for the right opportunity. Right. And I have other ventures. I have commercial real estate in Brampton and Mississauga as well. So I do other stuff as well, but it's just building a portfolio right now, just building. And real estate it's the safest. I mean, as long as you buy smart, it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed. There's nothing really else with business like real estate that's guaranteed.
Yeah. And so we have to probably go, me and Sheriston have to do a little Jeff Real Estate 101 course with you. So maybe we'll do this sometime off air.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Awesome. So that also brings me to the point where you said you kind of had your own way of learning and you never really had mentors. For many kids that want to be entrepreneurs per se, one, I need to ask you the question, are you kind of like born an entrepreneur versus, you can develop that skill?
You know what? This is a question where I seem to be changing my mindset with it all the time. I do believe some people are wired differently. Right. Some people are wired differently. Like the pandemic hit and I'm looking at other business owners that are decently successful and they're all like panicking. What are we going to do? And I looked at it as an opportunity. I'm like, you know what? Muskoka it was a 3-year project. Guess what? Now I'm going to fast forward that shit and I'm going to do it in 7-8 months. Yeah. I'm going to start a podcast. I started school again. I started taking on more business clients. I got a 2-book publishing deal. My first book will be out in January. I took it as let's go. Everybody's sleeping. Let's flow. And I've always had that mindset. I'm the type of person, I look at somebody else doing something and it's like, I don't get jealous. I'm like, that's awesome. I want to do better than them. And you have to have that mindset. So I think you can't program that into somebody. You can't program into somebody. So I look at my 2 kids, for example, and use this just pure example, because when you look at children, it's raw, it's natural. There's no lessons there, right? So you look at my 2 kids, my daughter, I could look at her now and she's a pure entrepreneur. Yeah. She is at 6-7 years old. She was making bracelets and coming back home. And I'm like, with money, I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I'm selling them at school. I'm like, you can't teach that shit, right? I mean, that was me at 12 years old. I was getting sports cards, opening packs of sports cards when it was crazy and going to shows and coming back with $100 every Saturday. And that was my spending money for the week. And I would do that steadily for like a year and a half, 2 years. It's that hustle. And I don't think you can teach it. Then I look at my son, where this kid he'll work out and most people at 10 reps are stopping. He's like, if he puts in his head, he's done doing 12, then he does 15, like that drive. Yeah. So you can't teach people. You could show examples, but I think it's almost hardwired into you, right? So that is why I think franchising is so important, because there's a lot of people that do want to be their own boss, but having that structure is very important for their lives. So I think franchising is very important for those people. And I do believe you could learn to be an entrepreneur. You can learn the process. You can learn how to run and organize and build a business, because there's tons of information out there. Right. I mean, what I teach you, what somebody else teach you, you go on the web and find for free now. Let's be honest, with the amount of YouTube videos and stuff. But are you going to be the type of person when you know that if I can take 6 months to get this done, are you going to have that mindset say, shit, I'm going to do this in 3 months? Because everybody takes 6 months. I'm going to do this in 3 months. Are you going to be able to, that person to want to do that? Like I'm taking a course right now. It's a 3.5-year course. I'm trying to hammer it out in 8 months. I want to get it done by January. Wow. So are you going to have that mindset where it's like, I'm going to do it? Or are you just going to sit back? So I think that's the difference of a true entrepreneur and somebody that wants to be an entrepreneur. Is your heart? It's like, you know what? We talked about this yesterday in my podcast is you talk about the top athletes, pick any sport. Basketball, for example, the top 20 basketball players in the world. If you put them all and genetically test them all, I would say they're pretty much all hardwired the same way. Right. The only difference from the top 2 or 3, Kobe Bryant. At his peak, he was still flying with his helicopter an hour and a half before and shooting 1,000 baskets before anybody else stepped on that court. He didn't have to do that at that level. People don't look at the Sidney Crosbys and all that, how much extra hours they put in when no one's watching. So it's how much and how hard are you willing to work and how dedicated you're going to be to something. And that, I think, is a difference from a top athlete, a top entrepreneur, a top of any field. Even if you work somebody, who makes it to the top? The ones that are willing to put the hardest work and all that stuff. So I think that's the only difference, is the hardwire of their brain and how much drive they have and how much effort they have, right?
Yeah. I've always kind of agreed with that point. It's just like, there's a lot of my friends who are like very, very book smart and they got great jobs and stuff like that. But I know for a fact they could never be entrepreneurs per se.
No.
Right. So I feel like there's a difference between obviously being smart, but as an entrepreneur, you can still learn everything. Like you don't need to be the smartest guy in the room, as long as you got the hustle, some intuition, and you can work hard, you can obviously become successful. And I think what our media describes it as is kind of, like fallacy, I guess. Sometimes it's like you have to have like a Harvard degree to be this really cool entrepreneur and crap like that. So
no, I think that's a bunch of bullshit. I mean, I'm not against education in the way where education is great. College is great because you build networking, you build friendships, you build structure in your life. You learn how to commit to something. But the reality is that everybody knows that the top entrepreneurs in the world are all high school. If some of them don't even have high school. Right. Yep. So I don't think education is going to change who you are. Right. Be honest. I think education I think somebody going to university for 4 to 6 years puts you 4 to 6 years behind everybody else and how many $100,000, $150,000 in debt.
Yeah.
Right. So you're starting already with your foot behind. And now a lot of these young people that might have inspiration to be an entrepreneur, now they have all this debt to pay. So what happens? They get a job. And you know what happens? Comfort.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue with every single young person nowadays, I find is that comfort level. They get comfortable, whether they're at their parents' house, in their house still, whether they're comfortable with their job, and that comfort just becomes a norm for them, and they don't want to break out of that comfort. And I think another thing that a lot of parents, we're gonna go back to parenthood, don't teach their kids is breaking out of fear. I think fear is a huge aspect as well, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they're fearful to take the next challenge. They're fearful to do the next thing. And I think that fear is what stops most people from accomplishing things. And I, as a parent, I take my kids and I've done this since they're fucking small. I can't even remember I would take them on a regular basis and I'll do something they're scared of. They're scared of jumping off this. You're scared of touching a spider. Guess what? You're touching a spider today. You're touching, and you teach them to conquer fear and understand fear is just a mental aspect that you could break. And if parents could start teaching kids that as a young age, how to conquer fear, they're not going to be, they're going to be fearless when they get older. They're going to be able to take challenges. They're not going to be scared to take that extra job or go for that extra interview. You hear a lot of entrepreneurs or a lot of people, oh, you know what? I really want to start this job, or I want to start this business, but it's not the right time.
Yeah.
Fuck's the right time. Today is the right time. If you're going to start something, you start it today. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that mindset, and a lot of people have that mindset is they get comfortable and they're scared.
Right.
And that fear is taught to them. And as a parent, don't touch that oven. You're going to get burned. Don't run. You're going to fall. You're constantly building fear in kids. Me, as my kids, when they were small, I was like, no allergies. You're shoving peanut butter down their mouth. Go play in the dirt. Go jump off that thing. You fall, you get hurt, you wipe the blood off, you keep going. And it's that mindset of teaching them how to just be independent and be fearless is a huge component of them having more success when they get older, right?
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like it creeps into other areas of your life too. Once you have that mindset established within you, and it kind of goes into the entrepreneurship drive as well. And just to connect your story, like even to do with your son's diagnosis, like how you handled that, it was like, don't tell me what this is going to be like I'm going to control the narrative on this. Right. So I like how
you have to, man, you have to. And I've been trying to teach that. Like the last 3 years, and I'll love to help you guys too if you want. The last 3 years, I've taken on a shitload of entrepreneurs, and I've taken them under my wing. And to be honest, I've never charged anybody. I do it more just giving back to entrepreneurs, and I help them develop their business. I help them with their ideas. I answer their questions. Like I said, I got this afternoon a few calls, and I've done that for 3 years because I love people that are eager to learn. I love people that want to learn. I want to feed that to them. I want to be able to see them grow. I want to see them develop, because to me, it's just, you have all this information. I've grown, I've learned, and I experienced, because I've had bads and goods. No one's perfect, right? Whether it's relationships, whether it's fatherhood, whether it's business, there's bad ventures, there's good ventures. I've had a couple businesses with partners. Partnership never worked for me. I will never do partnership again. Some companies have the best relationship with partners. They would not be able to function without their partner.
Right.
So it's finding the balance that's right for yourself and understanding what works for yourself and all that stuff, right?
For sure. Yeah. And it kind of goes into the passion aspect of it too. Like you need to love it, but you also need to understand how you can work to make it work for you, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very strong word, passion, because your goal as an entrepreneur, I say this all the time, is if you could find something you have passion for, you're living the life, you're living the dream, right? So if you could wake up every single day and go to your office, and I'm doing this podcast, I'm loving this shit right now. I'm having this passion for it. I have a smile every time I come to the office and doing a podcast with somebody. Like I'm on episode 48. And I've pre-recorded like 66 episodes. Like I'm just like, and this is, I don't know how many episodes have you guys done?
We're 20 deep.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like, and I have this month alone, another like 9 I'm recording. So it's and I get giddy. I get excited every time I'm doing a podcast, because you have the passion for it, right? If you have the passion for something, it comes out and people see it and they want to be part of it. Yeah. So passion is a huge aspect. And I'm a strong believer in, you have to have a purpose. And I always tell people, a lot of people are like, oh, this is my purpose. And it's a bunch of bullshit. They're like, purpose to help like all these motivational guys and all these guys trying to sell you shit on the internet. And my purpose is to help 1 million followers or 1 million this people. Find a true purpose. Yeah. Right. And I'm a strong believer also, is you can have more than one purpose. Mm-hmm. You know what? I want to be able to help young entrepreneurs. I want to be able to, my purpose is my children. My purpose is helping these people. My purpose is getting another 100,000 gloves in people's hands by the next day. It doesn't matter what your purpose is. Find purpose and then have passion around that purpose, and everything just starts working together, right? And you have a reason to wake up every day and have a smile on your face, right?
For sure. And you said something earlier, and you mentioned this before as well, but you said something earlier in the pod where you said you don't fall in love with your businesses. Like you're like, you have a passion for fighting in combat sports, but you don't fall in love with that. Like, how do you balance that? Like, can you touch on that? Kind of
I'm the type of person where materialistic items, watches, cars, I don't care what it is. I have zero emotional attachment to it. Business, I have zero emotional attachment. I have attachment to my parents, my loved ones, my kids. Those are tangible attachments. Everything else is a business. If Kimurawear were to fail today, I'm confident in myself. Within 3 months, I'll build another company. I don't give a shit. So having that confidence in yourself and having that understanding that it's just there. It's just there. It's not, there's so much more to life than a company. There's so much more to life than everything else. And that's why we talked, I don't know if we talked before or when we started, is I build my schedules around my kids. I build my schedules around my family. So everything I do business, it's great. but it's around everything else. It's not the end all kind of thing, right? And a lot of these entrepreneurs, they focus on their business and that's their life 24/7 and their obsession, and it doesn't succeed. They obsess more. It doesn't succeed. They obsess more. Now they're divorced. Now they're not talking to their kids. And it just becomes this obsession. It becomes this addiction of success. And reality is, what is success? Success should be, I always say, success and wealth. What is wealth? It's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working 15-hour days, which is fine because I work stupid amount of hours, but you're not enjoying in between, you're not going on your vacations, you're not, we go, besides the pandemic, we go on, and I'll talk about that in a sec, but road trips, but we go on 2-3 vacations every year. We go on, I'm home for so much time with the kids. Like it's that freedom, be able to just say, hey, I've done so well that now it's allocating and allowing me to enjoy the rest of my life, enjoy moments and build memories with my kids. That's the whole idea of wealth. Wealth is not freaking, could I be driving a nicer car? I drive a Jeep Wrangler. Could I be driving a nicer car? Yeah, I could be driving a nicer car. Is that gonna change who I am? No, it's not. So you get all these guys, and that's the world of Instagram, and that's the world of social media, where I had a guest on, I'm not gonna say who he is, but you can find them. And his post yesterday was him driving off the Lamborghini, high-fiving everybody. I'm like, you're a fucking douchebag. I go, and I probably make more money in a month than you make in 6 months. Like, why are you trying to show this lifestyle that's really not yours?
Right.
So be real and focus everything you do on time, freedom, enjoyment of life. We're here for such a short time. Like, we're here on this earth for such a short time. Enjoy life as much as you can. I mean, work is great and hustle is great, but you have to find that balance.
Right.
And once you find that balance, you find happiness, right?
For sure. Yeah. Part of the thing that we love about the podcasting experience and like connecting with all the other entrepreneurs is understanding that perspective and just like seeing like how it manifests in other people, because everyone has that thought, but like people act on it differently, right? And so just to hear that, to say like, I used to think of it that way too, just to be like, hey, when I grow up, like I want to be rich, and I want to be rich because I didn't want to work. I didn't want to like be tied down to anything. But then like I had to change that perspective to be like, think of it as freedom, not rich, but like financial freedom. So you have the time, and that's where your wealth is coming in. So I really like that point.
Yeah. It's a very important point that people have to understand, right? And we live in a society with social media that everything is driven on image. People show their perfect lives, right? So everybody is all about image and who's got a nicer car, who's got a nicer watch, who's got a nicer stuff. And because of that, you're forced to focus so much on work, and then you're not enjoying everything else, and time flies by. Time flies by. And this is something when you're looking at, even as a parent, and I always say this is with the memories, you're trying to build the memories. One thing, and obviously the pandemic has stopped that a bit, but every year we try to go to 2 road trips. Why road trips? There's nothing like being in a car for 24 hours with your family. You learn more about them in 24 hours. You argue, you scream, you cry, you throw up. At the end of the day, you've built these memories. You're going to be with you the rest of your life. We were at Myrtle Beach last year driving back, and usually on the way there, we stopped at Virginia Beach, Virginia for just a sleep. And then we drove the second half, and I drove the whole way. And on the way back, we're like, you know what? We're having such a great time here. Myrtle Beach is awesome, and we're having the best time here. And we're like, you know what? We're going to stay one more night, and I'm going to chuck it down just one day, get my ass back. So we stayed one night, drove back, and on the way back, I almost hit 2 deers. My son threw up in the car 3 times. The car smelled like barf. It was the most horrible road trip back. I left there at 5 a.m. I didn't get back till midnight. And you know what? We sit here, and that was probably the funnest time we had. Like the memories of just going into a gas station where they sell beer and seeing truck drivers go in, grab a freaking case of beer, and they're opening up and walking to their truck and drinking beer. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? But it's crazy, but it's all these memories, and they're invested into your head, into your body, and it's like we're laughing about them, and it's like I'm going through albums, and my wife was taking pictures of my kid throwing up. I'm like, why are you doing? She goes, we're gonna laugh at this one day, and it's so true. It's so true, right? It's so road trips. If I could tell any parent, do road trips. And that's a memory of myself growing up. And that's why I kind of instilled it. My dad worked at Ford up in Oakville, Ford Motors for 30 years, and worked crazy hours, 2 weeks day, 2 weeks nights, or 2 weeks a month. I would pretty much want to see my dad growing up, but every summer he would take off 4 weeks holidays. And those 4 weeks, he'd jump in the car, we'd pack the car, we'd be sleeping on the floor the night before, and at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, he'd wake us up, jump in the car, and we drive to Cape Cod. And we spend a few weeks, 2-3 weeks on the beach in Cape Cod every summer. And those memories I talk about them all the time. It's probably the greatest time I had as a kid. So being able to build those memories with your kids are so important. So I think road trips is a little hint that try it. I know right now with the pandemic is hard, but you could travel around Ontario, you could travel around Canada, you could travel if you're in the US, wherever your listeners, you could travel around still. Just find a spot and just enjoy the time. And just, like I said, spend the quality time with your family, right?
For sure. Yeah. And that you can't replace that with anything. Like there's nothing, there's no business or anything that's going to bring you that same feeling. And you touched on that a lot too. Like, and I've noticed you mentioned that in your podcast, kind of dealing with other entrepreneurs, kind of hearing their story and how they kind of balance their lives and things like that on your podcast. That's what I like the most, like just hearing other people's stories. So like you talked a bit about your podcast as well. So like, what kind of things are you learning from other entrepreneurs and how they work like on that journey? Like, what are the things that you're trying to pick from the people that you bring onto your podcast?
You're always learning, guys. I mean, the day you stop learning is the day you die. I always say that, right? So you're always learning. So advice to everybody too, I'm always trying to give little tidbits of advice is when you're around somebody, you don't have to take all the advice. I might sit here and give you advice for 5 hours and you might find one little thing in there and be like, shit, you know what? I can incorporate it into my stuff. And now I'm building my own identity, because that's a perfect situation is you take a little bit from everything you learn and you build your own identity. Right. And I think I've taken that with my podcast. I'm learning. I'm constantly learning. And as crazy as I'm learning about myself as well. Yeah. This is the first time ever where I'm getting these entrepreneurs come on my podcast and they're telling these great stories and they're talking. These guys have hundreds of thousands of followers and he's built these social platforms and these great businesses. I'm sitting there and I'm talking to them and I'm like, I know more than these guys. I mean, they sound conceited, but I'm like, it's reassuring that everything I know is like, you know what, 24 years of being in business, like I've learned a lot. And be honest, I've taken on 4 in the last little while, 4 of my actual guests as clients now. They actually came to me after the show for advice, and now I'm working with them. And it's been such a fun journey. It's a fun journey because I'm learning, I'm meeting, networking, crazy networking. I mean, I'm networking people that if I didn't have the podcast, I would never be able to network. Right. So it's a networking, the relationship building, and the learning aspect, and I'm having fun doing it, which is probably the most important part of it, right? Exactly. And for perspective, like those are the exact same reasons we love the podcast, and to see you doing that, even after all the success that you've had, to like just to keep learning and to keep grabbing from other people, like that's inspirational to us, just to understand that like there's never, like you said, like you don't ever stop. Like there's no point where you're just like, all right, I made it. Like, no.
I think another thing you mentioned there was the passion part. Like I would not get up at 8 a.m. to my 9 to 5, to be honest. So yeah, like this for sure. Like I enjoy it. Obviously I just met you, so it's a great introduction there too. So that's kind of why we strive and we wanted to do this podcast. We love the stories. It's just so cool meeting and learning about new people.
Yeah. It's just amazing. And it's just, and once you find, you said 9 to 5, once you find your passion, like I can't remember the last time I've been up past, like I'm up at 4:35 every morning. That's just who I am, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, to be a real entrepreneur, you don't have to be up that early. It's just who I am. I love being up early. I love communicating with people. I find that from 5 till 9 a.m., I get more done than I would the whole day. And that's my mindset, right? Yeah. So I like having structure. I like having morning structure in my life, right? So it's just finding what you love and finding a passion for it. Then once you have your passion, you find the purpose to make that passion succeed, and you just fly with it. And every single person has opportunity to be great. I know that's the easiest way to say it. Everybody has the opportunity to be great. You just have to want it. The minute you want it, it'll happen, right? And it's finding what you like to do and just flowing with it, right? There's so much opportunity out there. And people that, you always hear people, I can't get a job, or I can't get this, or I can't start a business. It's that I can't mentality is this. You have the whole Nike. I do. You could do it. Just do it. Stop procrastinating. Start today. Find a thing. I always tell people is you got to set goals. And we talked about that on all my podcasts. You said, and I'm a proponent of setting 3 goals: a 3-month, 6-month, and 1 year.
Okay.
So you set a long-term goal. I don't ever want to go past a year because too many factors happen. COVID happened. Too many factors happen. So you set a 1-year goal with the company. I set a 6-month goal and a 3-month goal. And it could be also physical. It could be whatever you want to do. And then once you set your 3-month goal, now you set your daily goals to get to your 3-month goal. And it's that whole domino effect. And I say, okay, it could be something simple like, okay, today, day 1, I'm going to buy all my supplies to start the business. Day 2, we're going to start a podcast. Day 2 is I'm going to find a platform. Day 3, I'm going to start writing some content. Day 4, and all of a sudden now you're into 2 weeks, you're into 3 weeks, into 4 weeks, and you've started that domino effect, and you're flowing. And all of a sudden now you've hit that 3-month mark, and nothing's going to hold you back to that point. You're seeing that goal now, and you're just flying with it. Whether, like I said, whether it's physical, whether it's I'm going to run for a marathon, I'm going to climb a hill, whatever your goals are. Everybody has different goals. You have to set those goals, write them down, physically write them down so you can actually see them. I'm not into that whole vision board shit and all that stuff. Yeah. Just grab a pen and paper and write it down, and have accountability to it, and say, here, this is my goal. This is the date on the calendar. I like calendars. Look at the date on the calendar and say, okay, this is what I got to do every day to get there. This is how much time, whether it's 15 minutes, an hour, allocate this much time to get to that goal. And all of a sudden it starts happening. It starts happening. And if you could just stay focused within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, you're flying with whatever you want to do, whether it's business, whether it's a pocket, whatever you want to do, just, it'll start flowing from there. Right. So that's the easiest way to do anything, is setting your goals and just setting daily goals to get there.
For sure. I don't know who said this, but I remember there's a quote that says, like, we as humans tend to kind of overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term. And it all comes down to how we break down that goal setting. So to see you kind
100%.
of go back from like the long term to short term, it sums it up perfectly in there.
Yeah, it's just, everything's achievable. It's just like I said, there's so many people you hear that, oh, I can't lose weight, or I can't stop drinking. Okay, start today, 1 day. Let's not drink for 1 day. It's simple. I'm saying just start today and just start setting. And like I said, I'm still the type where, whether it's a book, I still love physical books. I know people are like, everybody's into their audio book and all. I still like looking at a book. And the reason I like looking at a book is every time I'm reading, I highlight everything. So I'll highlight parts of shit I'll read. I'm like, that makes sense. I'll highlight it and I'll fold that page, and it's something to look back on. If I ever want to think of something, or I want some kind of motivation, or I need whatever it is, I'll go back and do it. Same thing every morning. I still handwrite my do list of the day. Every single morning, I grab a scrap piece of paper. I'll grab old scrap. I cut them up and have piles of this paper everywhere in the office, everywhere at home. And I literally, like, throughout the night, if I think of something or I'm going to bed, I'll email myself. And then in the morning, I go look at all my emails of my do. I'll write them down. Anything I had in my head, I'll write my do list. And I started. Okay, I'm doing A, B, C, and I start checking them off as the day goes on. Whatever I didn't finish goes to the top of the list the next day. And I've been doing that, 20-something years, man. And I do every single day. I write a do list, and it's just a way to, it's accountability. You feel accomplished. At the end of the day, when I'm like, I finished my whole list today, and it's 3 o'clock, and I'm like, this is fucking awesome. So it's accomplishment as well, right?
It's that sense of fulfillment, but
100%.
And we can see that process, how that's kind of worked out for you, and the success that you've had, right? So we can't dispute it.
Thank you, buddy.
I appreciate it. Jeff, that kind of wraps up like the bulk of our podcast, like in terms of like asking you about your career and background and things like that. But one of the things that we like to do at the end is just do like a little lightning round where we shoot a couple questions at you, just meant to be fun, and you can answer with like the first thing that comes to mind.
That's already good. Okay, let's go.
All right. So we'll start with something easy. You did mention that you like you like your physical books a lot. So can you tell us what your favorite book of all time is? Or maybe currently.
Oh God. I'm actually reading a book right now, which is fun. Is The Man and His Watch. It's just a storytelling book. And it's just every night I like just reading. I take one chapter out of it and I read a story of just somebody's life and their experiences. So that's another aspect. So it's not always about learning. It's more also just relaxation, entertainment of it as well, right?
A man of balance. I love it. I love it. So on that tip, next question. You had a long day, crazy hours at Kimura or wherever you're working because you're all over the place. How do you come home and unwind?
I take baths.
Yeah.
I love my baths, man. I had one last night. I love, honestly, I love putting candles. I love everybody's asleep. I'll put Epsom salts. I'll sit in the bath for half an hour and just get away from the world. I do that. I try to take a nice hot bath at least 2, 3 times a week.
I love it. I don't think a lot of guys would admit that, so I love that about you. So we want to go back to your experience from Kimurawear in the combat sports sphere. Who would you say is your favorite combat artist?
Of all time, God, I mean, because I grew up watching, not grew up, but I mean, he was one of the factors of me enjoying martial arts. Watching, I say it's Chuck Liddell.
Chuck Liddell.
Nice.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
The little mohawk.
yeah. It was that period, right? I mean, obviously the sport has evolved so much more since then, but he was just with the wrestling background, his hook. I mean, it was just a fun time to watch the sport evolve, right?
He was the Iceman.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And then last question here. This is something that we try and ask all of our guests because we're trying to get a survey going here. Do you enjoy pineapples on your pizza?
No, I hate it.
Yes.
I fucking hate it.
Thank you.
I'm a fruit eater. I'm a healthy fruit eater, but I like fruit by itself.
Yeah.
And,
I
and
don't
pi-
know. I enjoy the salt, sweet, the sweet and savory kind of aspect of it. But yeah, the majority of people on here they've enjoyed it. I don't know.
could I ask you guys a question? I always ask everybody at the end of my podcast.
Yeah.
And you can answer individually, obviously. If you guys were to pass today in a few words, how would you want to be remembered by your friends?
Cheers, you go first.
Damn. I've always wanted to be remembered as someone that didn't stop working for whatever that they wanted and didn't stop having a positive outlook. Like I've never wanted to be someone that's kind of been negative and kind of get down on myself. Like I've always wanted to have that vision of look at the silver lining. So if that's something that they remember me for, I would love that.
Yeah. For me personally, it's just someone who just was willing to help you out when you needed it. I think that's for me the most important part is just like you, Jeff, you mentioned you don't ask people for money to give out help. I'm same ways. Like I have friends who are just starting up businesses like in the tech space and they ask me like, how did you do it? Like, feel free to give me a call. Like I'll let you know what I know.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, just be a good person. That's at the end of the day. Just know, be that good guy.
I love that. I love that. Simple, sweet, and simple.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeff?
I always say the same. I want to be that person that people knew they could count on when shit hit the fan, because there's a lot of times when shit hit the fan and you turn around and who's there really for you. So I want people to remember me by being that person that no matter what, you turn around and he was always there for me. As long as, and that's obviously for your closest, most intimate friends and family, right? So yeah, somebody that they could count on. Pretty simple.
100%.
Awesome.
Love that. That was a great way to end it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, boys. I appreciate this.